Welcome to the Ad Nauseam podcast, where classical gourmands everywhere can finally get their fill. Join us for a delectable discussion of Greco-Roman civilization stretching from the Minoans and Mycenaeans through the Renaissance and right down to the present. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here are your hosts, Dr. David Noe and Dr. Jeff Winkle.
Welcome, everybody, once again to the Ad Nauseam podcast, coming at you live from the Vomitorium. My name is Jeff Winkle, and I am here, as always, with my good friend, Dr. David Noe. How you doing, David?
Very well, Jeff. Thank you.
We're going to be talking more Homer today, but before we get into that, I believe you have a quote that you wanted to lead us off with.
I do. I have a quote from the famous scholar Anthony Long from his work Stoic Studies, 1996. He says, "Homer was the poet for the Greeks. Children learned parts of the Iliad and Odyssey by heart as part of their primary education. All Greek literature and art and just about all Greek philosophy resonate against the background of Homer." And here's the really interesting part. Throughout classical antiquity, well into the Roman Empire, Homer held a position in Mediterranean culture that can only be compared with the position the Bible would later occupy.
Yeah, that's huge. And I don't think that's an exaggeration at all.
No, not at all.
No, to the degree to which Homer was mined for not just narrative, but for theology, philosophy, it's endless.
For DIY?
DIY, yeah.
How am I supposed to hitch a team, plow a field, catch a fish?
Yeah.
It's all there in Homer somewhere in these 24 books of the Iliad, 24 books of the Odyssey.
Right.
But what's missing, Jeff, that people often want to find when they come to the Iliad in particular?
Well, there's lots of stuff that you would, I think, as a new reader, if you just picked up a copy of Homer, that you would expect to be there. I find this with my myth students a lot, is that they expect the Iliad to be the story of the Trojan War. And what's not in there? Famous things like the Trojan horse. Probably a bit about the Trojan War that probably most people know about.
It's the most exciting part.
It's the most exciting part.
If you
right?
buy any kind of children's book on the Iliad or the Odyssey, it's going to inevitably have on its cover a picture of the Trojan horse.
Right.
Maybe on wheels, maybe on a Segway, but whatever the case may be, it's not in the book.
It's not in the book at all. And other famous scenes like the death of Achilles, him getting the arrow through the heel.
Right.
Achilles is very much alive when the Iliad ends.
Yeah, what's up with that?
I know. And not only that, Homer never mentions the heel business.
Huh.
It's we have a very mortal Achilles in this
Too
book. Too mortal.
So the most extended treatment of the fall of Troy, the Trojan horse, all those juicy items, comes in a much later epicist, of course, Virgil.
Yes.
Book 2 of the Aeneid, one of the longest books in the epic, gorgeous book, really beautiful, as Aeneas recounts to his girlfriend Dido the things that happened at Troy.
Yeah.
But you're not going to find that in Homer himself.
No, not at all. Right. You say gorgeous, but also brutal and bloody
it's
at
brutal.
the same too. Yeah. Yes, exactly. So I think one of the things that I wanted to talk about last episode, which we didn't get to.
I probably cut you off.
That's probably what it. Yeah, that's probably what it was exactly. When I walked out of here steaming.
Did you?
It did. Yeah.
Steaming like a
tea kettle.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Like a sausage in a pan,
like
maybe.
A sausage in a pan.
Tell us more, Jeff.
Well, we'll get around. I think you're setting me up to talk about some epic similes. I believe.
Yeah.
So yes, epic similes. So one of the things that many readers of Homer have zeroed in on as something that's kind of unique to Homer or particularly kind of pleasing about Homer are his use of these very interesting similes from nature.
Right.
So he'll often be in the middle of a scene and he will kind of depart from that scene and describe what's going on and use a word picture of something that's going on in the waves of grass in the field or on the sea.
Yeah, we read a little bit of one last week when we were talking about men are like it was in book 6, men are like the leaves on the trees, right? They fall down every autumn and so forth, and they're replaced.
It's the Kansas simile.
That's
all
right.
we are is dust in the wind.
You mentioned that.
Yes.
And I remember this one just off the top of my head that I especially like is when Hector is moving along the ranks of the boats on the beach because Achilles is off the field and Hector is setting fire to the ships.
Oh, yeah.
There's no way the Greeks are going to get back to their homeland if Hector burns their transportation. And as he's setting fire to the ships, Homer says, the Greek soldiers come stumbling out from their tents and from the boats like wasps or bees from a hive that's been filled with smoke.
Yeah, that's great.
So evocative, such a beautiful picture of human experience. But we have one at the beginning here of Book 9, don't we?
Yeah, we do. If I can just mention one of the, because just you triggered a memory, is hopefully at some point down the line we'll maybe devote a podcast to the movie Troy.
Absolutely.
Which was not a film that I enjoyed all that much.
No, but I've been doing a lot of push-ups for the role of of Achilles there, the Brad Pitt character.
You're ready to jump in.
Oh, I'm ready.
I can see that. I can actually see that. Yeah,
that's very kind of you.
But I remember. So another simile that Homer uses are the lines of soldiers smashing into each other, like waves smashing into each other. And there's a great crane shot that goes over the Greeks and the Trojans, and they're kind of serpentine.
Yeah, it's right near the beginning, isn't it?
That's right, exactly.
While Achilles is charging toward the Temple of Apollo.
Yes.
Which I don't think is in the epic, but, it's Hollywood. So.
But I thought that was a nice touch.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Somebody had read some Homer.
Absolutely.
In the lead up to that film, right. But get us to kind of where we're going, and with a simile that's germane to the topic.
Right. So the beginning of Book 9, we have this gorgeous epic simile, and I'm reading from a different translation than last time. This is the 1898 translation of William Cullen Bryant. So it's kind of archaic, but I like the way it sounds. The Trojans thus kept watch, while through the night the power of flight, companion of cold fear, wrought on the Greeks, and all their bravest men were bowed beneath a sorrow hard to bear. As when two winds upturn the fishy deep, I tripped over the archaism, the north wind and the west that suddenly blow from the Thracian coast, the black waves rise at once and fling the seaweed to the shore. Thus were the Achaeans troubled in their hearts.
Yeah. That's great. The fishy deep. I love that.
Did I have you at fishy deep?
You had me at fishy deep. Yeah. That's a great. I love that translation. I've never read that one.
Well, it's in the public domain, as I like to say. It's quite nice. It has thous and hasts and so forth. But I would suggest you don't want an epic to sound too pedestrian, right?
No.
It's got to have a little bit of detachment, a little bit of remove.
Exactly, right, yeah.
So the Achaeans on their beds, the Greeks, the Achaeans, the Danaans, all names for the same group of people, right?
If one name is good, 40 names is better.
Exactly. We have to have variety in our epic. They're trying to go to sleep, but they're terrified, right? They're filled with sorrow and anguish because they're losing, and so they are like the black waves that throw the seaweed up upon the shore in Thrace.
That's great. So started in simile from the beginning of Book 9. Why are we jumping to Book 9?
Well, let's wipe that epic simile off your face.
Okay.
And talk about the fact that Book 9 is one of the three plot hinge points in the epic as a whole.
Yes.
Right? Book 1 sets it up, a conflict. Book 9, we see Achilles at his best and at his worst at the same time.
Exactly.
And then Book 22, following H.J. Rose. Book 22, this is a plot spoiler, right? Death of Hector.
Right.
1, 9, and 22. So what are we looking at today, Jeff, with Book 9 in particular?
Well, Book 9 is sometimes given the title The Embassy.
Right.
So there we have Achilles, as we talked about last time. He's had this fight with Agamemnon, and he's decided to go pout in his tent.
For 17 books.
17-book pout. Right, so the vast majority of the Iliad, Achilles is not on the battlefield.
Right.
He's sulking. Again, another thing that I think often surprises people. You'd expect your quarterback to be out there with the team, but he's not. He's with his ball in his tent. And so Agamemnon is desperate because everything's falling apart. And without Achilles, he can't win the war.
Right.
He can't move things forward. And so he's trying to come up with some plan to try to win, bribe, cajole, persuade Achilles to come back. Yeah.
And Agamemnon is basically a depraved character.
Yes.
He's the person that believes that might makes right.
Might makes right.
Yeah, if you're stronger, you have the right to rule.
Right.
His strength, however, doesn't come from natural excellence as Achilles, but his comes from the consent of those he sort of governs.
Exactly, right. So he's from Mycenae.
Right.
And so his clout is based on the wealth and,
That's right.
and influence of that city.
Things that Homer wants us to think are really base.
Yes.
I believe.
Exactly.
So after this epic simile of the tossing and turning, he has to call an assembly.
Right.
He's the basileus. He's the king, right?
Right.
He's the feudal lord that marshals the different forces. He brings everyone together, and the first person to make a speech is Diomedes.
Diomedes, yes, exactly, right. Did you want to read a little bit of that speech?
Yeah, I could. What translation do you have with you today?
I have the Fitzgerald translation. I don't have that passage right in front of me.
Okay.
But I think that the end of that speech is particularly powerful.
Yeah. So he says, Diomedes says to Agamemnon, putting a fist in his face, "Thou longest to return, go then, the way is open. By the sea the barks that brought thee from Mycenae lie." Bark, of course, is the boat. "A numerous fleet. Yet others will remain. long-haired Achaeans, till we overthrow the city. Should they also pine for home, then let them flee with all their ships, while I with Sthenelus fight on, until we make an end of Troy, for with the gods we came.
Yeah. Amazing. I think what's incredible that one of the incredible things about this, so Agamemnon, he's the Basileus,
Right.
but he's not an all-powerful emperor.
No.
Right? And these other warriors are willing to kind of stand up and basically kind of give him the finger.
They have independence.
Yes, exactly. And it's we talked last time about Diomedes' deeds on the battlefield.
Right.
But another way you display your arete is how you speak.
That's right.
Yep.
Speaker of words as well as a doer of deeds. Very
right.
important theme throughout the classical world.
Yeah.
And Diomedes says, I'm not going back, Agamemnon. You and anyone else who wants to go, you can go back. But I and my good friend Sthenelus, we're going to stay, and we're going to defeat the Trojans eventually, even if we have to do it by ourselves. And he adds this little point, with the gods we came.
Yes.
Now, this shows, I think, a large part of the amazing artistry of whoever it is that wrote the epic. We'll just call him Homer.
Yeah.
Because in line 5, I think, at the beginning of the epic, right after we get, this is book 1, right after we get the part about the wrath, the rage, we get this expression, the will of Zeus was fulfilled. Mm-hmm. And that notion that there is a divine orchestration, that Zeus is working out his ways through all of these characters, that theme is never dropped throughout all 24 books. It's present everywhere.
Yeah.
We see it right here.
Right.
Diomedes has all this confidence of winning the war. We came with the gods.
Yes.
Now, he could be wrong, but he's motivated and driven by this idea.
You dance with the gods that brung you.
That's right.
That's right.
Exactly.
But
so.
and it's also, I think it also speaks to the heavy hand of fate and destiny that's on this epic in a way that you don't see it in the Odyssey.
No.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So Aristotle, as you probably know, said that the Iliad is about pathos.
Yes.
The Iliad is suffering. It's
right.
anguish. It's heart-wrenching struggle. And the Odyssey is about ethos, or athos, to use the Greek pronunciation. It's about character.
Yes.
It's a domestic epic, but we're in the Iliad for now.
I've also heard it just kind of a slight kind of twist on that. The Iliad as tragedy. It's a poem about death, and the Odyssey as comedy. Not in that makes you laugh, but it ends with a reunion.
That's right.
It embraces life.
It has a happy ending.
Yes,
for sure.
Yeah.
It shows characters as in some ways worse than they are, more ridiculous. The Odyssey does.
Yes.
And the Iliad shows characters as in some ways better than they are, not morally better, but larger than life.
Yeah.
They're doing
I like
things.
that.
Yeah, it's not original with me, but it's again Aristotle's definition of tragedy and comedy, respectively. Tragedy shows characters as better than they are in the sense of more capable.
Yeah.
They don't do anything on a small scale.
Right.
Diomedes says, if I'm staying, well, let's do it by myself.
Right.
Nestor speaks next, and then Agamemnon puts together his embassy to send them off to Achilles' tent.
Right, exactly. And so the bulk of the book is made up of an exchange of speeches between the three chosen ones. We have Odysseus, the king of Ithaca, our famous trickster.
Yep.
We have Phoenix, who, for lack of a better term, was a nanny to Achilles growing up. And we have Ajax, one of two Ajaxes, who's kind of your second best warrior.
He has a kind of interesting shield, doesn't he?
Yes.
Far better than Captain America.
Way better than that. And I would say even better than that, the Wakandan shield.
Definitely.
That kind of flares out. Yeah.
Captain Telamon, you might say, right?
Yeah.
Because Ajax is the son of Telamon. He's got a shield that has 7 ox hides on it.
Yes.
7 layers of leather,
Right.
impenetrable leather.
Yes, and even just to pick that up.
Yeah.
Right. So he's probably the closest warrior to Achilles.
It's a dead heat, really, I would say, between him and Diomedes.
Right.
Often taken as the second best.
Exactly.
For
right.
sure. This solid oak shield with 7 layers of leather on it. He can do some serious damage on the battlefield.
Exactly right. And hopefully we'll have some time in a future episode to kind of talk about the tragedy of Ajax when kind of his expectations
He goes
of how
insane.
he was seen were. He goes insane.
That's
and
right.
all this is undercut from underneath him.
Yeah, that's the Sophocles episode.
Right. There you go.
Which at this rate we'll probably get to in about 2024.
Exactly right. But here we have these three, and they each make a speech to Achilles, and Achilles responds in turn. And so Odysseus goes first, and I've read this explained in that you lead with your best speaker.
Yeah. So developing that theme, the reason that these three were chosen,
Yes.
both by Agamemnon and by the author, is that they each represent a different aspect of Achilles' character and Achilles' motivation and intention.
Right. Exactly. So Odysseus comes. He comes to Achilles with the laundry list of bribes.
Here are the things that Agamemnon's going to give you, Achilles.
Exactly right. So I think Agamemnon wants to put the words of his bribes in the mouth of the most persuasive speaker.
Yes.
Right. So we have Odysseus do that, and then Phoenix, can speak on a more familial level.
Right.
And Ajax can kind of speak man to man.
Right.
Right.
So Phoenix has the long history
Yes.
with Achilles, raised Achilles as a surrogate father.
Right.
It reminds Achilles at every point about Achilles' actual father, Peleus, the mortal man who married the silver-footed Thetis,
Yes.
the sea nymph. But Peleus didn't play really any role in Achilles' life and
No.
upbringing.
No.
Instead,
Mama's boy.
Yeah, instead Phoenix was there at all times, taking care of him, dandling him on his knees, feeding him wine.
How does one dandle?
I don't know. Feeding him red meat and red wine to
Yes.
make him a hero.
Right.
Odysseus,
Does it still work?
I think so.
Yeah, I'll
Isn't
buy
that
that.
how you're raising your sons?
I should be. I'm going to start now. Yeah.
Odysseus represents the honey-tongued orator.
Yes.
Always filled with words, right? Much, much later on, he and Ajax have a competition over Achilles' armor.
That's right.
And Odysseus wins, not because he's better than anybody else, but because he has more words.
Right. I think a scene that could easily be read as almost kind of a passing of the torch.
Definitely.
From the one hero type to the trickster.
Yeah.
Yes.
The valorous one to the shrewd, the clever.
Exactly right. Yeah.
And then Ajax, as you said, he represents just brawn.
Right.
Kind of with the suggestion that, Achilles, if you don't come back soon, I'm going to get all the glory here.
Right. And he's kind of a lunkhead.
Yes, definitely.
He's kind of a Stallone.
Yeah, well played by an actor whose name I can't remember.
I don't even in Troy.
In Troy,
I don't even
tall,
remember.
redheaded guy swinging an axe all the time.
He had an axe.
He had an axe.
Okay, why not?
That's my memory.
Yeah.
A bit of a Gimli, but on a different.
A Gimli. That's exactly what I was
Different
picturing.
scale,
Kind of
for
a
sure.
tall Gimli.
That's right.
As it were. Yeah.
So what are the bribes? When they get to the tent,
Yeah.
they get to the tent of Achilles, and he's not there by himself, but he's there with his cousin Patroclus.
Right. Exactly. Kind of his right-hand man.
That's right.
Yes.
Who's not allowed to fight either.
No. Exactly
Patroclus is a decent warrior in his own right, but Achilles won't let him fight because this is an insult to Achilles' whole family.
Right.
So there's a reception when they get to the tent. Do you have a little bit of that keyed up you can read?
What I have queued up is the bribes.
Okay.
Yeah, and so Odysseus, Achilles welcomes them.
What is the welcome
into the
like?
tent.
I'd like to talk about that for a second.
Sure.
Because these transitions between the action and the conversation, I find them quite interesting because much like Glaucus and Diomedes, it's not just business all the time.
No.
There has to be hospitality.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So the three arrive at the tent of Achilles, and what kind of a spread does he put out for them?
Well, I got the passage. Let me read a little bit here.
I bought you some time, yeah?
Exactly. Thank you. All right. I hope you didn't hear the pages flipping. But Fitzgerald translates, and Prince Achilles led them in. He seated them on easy chairs with purple coverlets in a tent.
Yeah.
So this isn't just camping.
No, this is glamping.
This is serious glamping.
Yes, when you travel to the plains of Troy, right, for 10 years, you got to take the best stuff.
Exactly. But you got to imagine the run of the mill slinger and archer. They're sleeping on the ground.
He's not living like this.
No. So Achilles lives large wherever he goes. He's got
purple coverlets.
and he's got the RV.
That's right.
Right.
Duvets everywhere.
And to Patroclus, who stood near, he said, "Put out an ampler wine bowl, big. Use more wine for stronger drink, and place a cup for each. Here are my dearest friends beneath my roof." Patroclus did as his companion bade him. Meanwhile, the host set down a carving block within the fire's rays, a chine of mutton. I don't know how much big a chine is, but
I don't know. It's a back.
it's a back.
Yeah, it's a word that means the back.
Okay.
And we have many shrewd listeners. So if I try to describe what the back of the hog is, I think the bacon is on the belly.
Yes.
The back, I think, is loins.
Okay.
Maybe chops.
Wow.
I know we can sort it out in post-production.
You know your cuts of meat.
I do.
That's pretty impressive.
It's a David Letterman reference there. Know your cuts of meat.
Right. So a chine of mutton and a fat chine of goat he placed upon it, as well as savory pork chine. So he's going for the good stuff, the strong
Barbecue,
wine,
yep.
the barbecue, and he's got not just a fancy tent and coverlets, he's got meat.
Yes.
Yes.
So why would he receive them like this? Because he has a beef, so to speak, with them as the representatives of Agamemnon, as he's sitting in his tent there with, Patroclus, and they're drinking mojitos or
Right.
something. And they see these three guys come over the horizon. He's got to know they're up to no good.
Yes.
They come with a purpose. This is not a friendly visit. So given all of the emotions and the strategies that surround the visit, why would Achilles do all this?
Well, it's something that I think becomes much more central, say, to the plot of the Odyssey. But we're talking about the whole concept and code of Xenia, how hosts receive guests and how guests behave within the house or tent of a host. So there are rules for how one does this,
and not restricted to Greco-Roman literature by any stretch, because some listeners will know there's a famous passage in the book of Genesis where Abraham entertains three guests at the Oak of Mamre. And it's a very important scene. And in the letter to the Hebrews in the New Testament, the writer says something like, make sure you practice Xenia, for some have entertained angels unaware, along those lines. It's a very common motif throughout.
It's a very Middle Eastern kind
absolutely.
of thing. Right.
Someone shows up at your door, you treat them well, even if you don't really like them.
Yes, exactly right. And I would say, you and I having traveled throughout Greece,
That's right.
It's still, Greece is part of the landmass of Europe, but it's much more of a Middle Eastern country than it is European.
Yeah, and when we returned from one of our trips, as I remember, although I don't particularly like you brought me a bottle of ouzo.
Yeah.
Right? And I said, "No, what's motivating Jeff here with this nice gift of ouzo? It's Xenia."
I was following the code of Xenia.
Xenia,
I wasn't
obviously.
doing it because I particularly like you either.
No, or want me to drink a licorice flavored, how do you describe it?
It's like
gasoline flavored with licorice?
It's a gasoline flavored with black licorice.
There you go.
There you go. Anise.
I especially like it, incidentally.
Yes, I do too.
Yeah.
Yes. So, where were we? I got lost on the chine.
You were talking about why
Yes.
Achilles would treat these unwelcome guests with such generosity and hospitality.
Yes. Well, I think one of the main reasons is this is a code of treating the guest that's covered by Zeus, honored by Zeus. So it almost has kind of a religious stamp on it, as just simply the way things are done.
And all of these individuals are related to Zeus in some way, right?
Oh, good point.
You don't get into the epic unless you are related to Zeus in some fashion. So we have Odysseus, son of Laertes. You go back far enough, you find Zeus.
Yes, which is true for hundreds of characters.
That's right. Agamemnon as well.
Yes.
His father, Atreus, his father, Pelops, his father, Tantalus.
And his father,
Zeus. So that's how you get into the epic. That's why you have a character that's larger than life.
Yes.
You're descended from the gods in some way.
It's nepotism.
That's right.
Yep.
So they show up. What exactly are the bribes that Odysseus offers in his first speech? There's quite a list.
There is quite a list. Let me just find it quickly again. So Odysseus comes with a list of bribes that Agamemnon has told him to offer to Achilles, and it's a long list. I'll read a little bit of it. I'm not going to go through the whole thing because it's speaking of larger than life, it's ridiculously long. But Odysseus comes to Achilles once they've had their chines, and he says, "Now listen, and let me list for you what just now in his quarters he, Agamemnon, proposed: 7 new tripods, and 10 bars of gold, and then 20 shining cauldrons, and 12 horses, thoroughbreds, that by their wind and legs have won him many prizes. Any man who owned what these have brought him would not lack resources, could not be pinched for precious gold. So many prizes have these horses carried home. And then he will give you 7 women, deft in household handcraft, women of Lesbos, chosen when you yourself took Lesbos town, as they outshone all womankind in beauty. These he will give you, and one more whom he took away from you then, Briseis' daughter, concerning whom he adds a solemn oath, never to have gone to bed or coupled with her, as its custom is, my lord, with men and women. These are all yours at once." And he goes on, even to the point of saying one of the gifts is that Odysseus would end up being Agamemnon's son-in-law.
Equal to his real son, his biological son, Orestes.
Right, yeah.
So what about these cauldrons? What's a cauldron? What does that have to do with the story?
Well, I mean, it's in tripods,
Yeah.
right? It's shiny stuff,
Yes.
right?
Made of bronze.
Yes,
A
exactly.
a semi-precious metal, right? Third in value below gold and silver.
Right. But probably more important here for not for what they are, but for what they represent, right? So Agamemnon's he's always a step behind. That's part of one of the awful things about him, and he's working from this idea that this is the kind of honor that Achilles is interested in.
He wants stuff.
He wants stuff that he can pile up outside his tent, and when people walk by, say, "That guy, I want to be like that guy."
That's right.
Yeah. But as we'll quickly see, this is going nowhere.
Right.
And one thing I also wanted to add is this passage is one that's often pointed to as evidence for Homer as an oral poet.
Right.
Because the list that Odysseus gives is almost verbatim from what Agamemnon says just a few pages before this.
Now, careful there, Dr. Jeff.
Please.
You're not going to veer away from Homer as an artist into the larger historical, geographical, schlemonic elements, are we?
This is just a subtle way of giving a taste for an upcoming episode.
All right.
But thanks for the check.
So the idea is that maybe this was an orally composed poem, because the speech of Agamemnon, in which he sets out the gifts, is later repeated in large part verbatim by Odysseus.
Exactly.
Here are the gifts. So
almost like the singer returning to a chorus.
That's right.
But what's really striking is what Odysseus leaves out. So when Agamemnon gives his list, he ends this with, and if you tell him to accept all these things and then submit to me.
Right.
Bend the knee.
Right.
And that's the part that Odysseus very conspicuously leaves out.
Yes, very shrewd.
Very shrewd.
So all of these things are offered to Achilles as inducements to get him back on the battlefield, because everyone recognizes that without Achilles, the Greeks are sunk.
Yes.
They're not going to win.
Exactly.
How does Achilles respond then to these bribes? I mean, Phoenix appeals, just to take a slight detour, Phoenix appeals to his sense of loyalty, his sense of duty to the rest of the Greeks, and Ajax appeals to his sense of valor.
Yes.
But Odysseus's bribes are...
It's a big fat no.
They're rejected.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, so he has this doesn't, like I said, Agamemnon doesn't get it. He doesn't get where Achilles is at, and so he rejects Agamemnon's kind of notion of what is honorable and what a hero like Achilles would even want. And in rejecting that, this is a key moment. This is in terms of the story, in terms of the plot, but also in terms of the themes, is that Achilles rejects that kind of that physical, temporal honor for something else. So, am I on the right path? Do you agree with that? Yeah.
Yeah, I have a little bit of it here I can read.
Yeah, please.
This is again the Bryant translation. The swift Achilles answered him, that is Odysseus, and said, Son of Laertes, nobly born, and versed in wise devices, let me frankly speak, just as I think, and just as I shall act, and then ye will not importune me more. Stop begging, in other words.
Yeah.
Hateful to me as are the gates of hell is he who, hiding one thing in his heart, utters another.
Right.
I shall speak as seems to me the best, nor deem I that the son of Atreus or the other Greeks can move my settled purpose, since no thanks are paid to him who with the enemy maintains a constant battle. In other words, Achilles is saying, I'm not going to listen to anybody, and least of all to the son of Atreus, that is Agamemnon, because nobody's my equal.
Exactly.
I am naturally the best.
Yes.
And therefore I can't be challenged by anyone.
Right. And I've always read, I love that line, that hateful to me is the man who says one thing and hides another in his heart. I always read that as, he's responding to Agamemnon, but almost as a subtle dig at Odysseus, too.
Definitely.
That's who Odysseus is.
That's right. That's his character and
identity.
The mask wearer. Yeah. And he ought to know better, really, than coming as Agamemnon's lackey to try to get Achilles back on the battlefield. But he has to submit to Agamemnon's superior authority.
Right.
To some extent.
Right. Now, also... kind of wrapped up in this is another a passage where Achilles mentions his fate. Right, this is another famous thing about Achilles that many people know. I think outside of Homer, that he's doomed or destined to die at Troy. That he's been given this choice that he can either have the long anonymous life, as the gentleman farmer back home. But once he dies, nobody will, after a generation or two, remember his name. Or he can have kind of the short, fast, glorious life on the battlefield, after which he'll be remembered forever in story and song. And so Achilles' fate is, of course, we know what it is. He talks about that. He says his mother tells him these two fates sweep before him, and his concept of honor now is not the Agamemnon's version of honor, but now it's immortality in story and song, rather than the honor of stuff. Right.
So when we're thinking about Achilles' honor, we're taken back to that passage in Book 1 where he goes and complains to his mother.
Yeah.
Silver-footed Thetis, that's her epithet. She's the daughter of Nereus, a sea god, one of 50 daughters, a Nereid. And Thetis has these words as she weeps. She says, this is again the Lombardo translation, "Oh, my poor child, I bore you for sorrow, nursed you for grief. Why? You should be spending your time here by your ships happily and untroubled by tears, since life is short for you, all too brief. Now you're destined for both an early death and misery beyond compare. It was for this I gave birth to you in your father's palace under an evil star.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because when in Book 9, where Achilles references kind of his fates again, it's the same, but it's also slightly different. And let me just read that passage again from the Fitzgerald translation, where he's I believe he's responding to Phoenix, and he says, "My mother, Thetis of the silvery feet, tells me of two possible destinies carrying me towards death. Two ways: if on the one hand I remain to fight around Troy town, I lose all hope of home, but gain unfading glory. On the other, if I sail back to my own land, my glory fails, but a long life lies ahead of me. To all the rest of you I say, sail home."
Yeah.
So there he's, in Book 1, it's Thetis suggests, and I think Thetis is right, she knows Achilles' fate. He's destined for the short, tragic life. Mm-hmm. And here, I've always read this as Achilles, he's lying to himself. He kind of pretends at this point like,
he could still do this.
I could go home.
I could still go home. And
even makes a show of kind of, I'm marshaling my ships, I'm getting ready to go.
Yeah, we're going to tear out of here tomorrow.
But I think part of really kind of the sad, pathetic tragedy is that Achilles knows that's not true.
Right.
Is that he knows which side of the fate choice he's on.
Yes.
Right.
And of course, this scene is repeated beautifully in Plato's Apology, where
Right.
Socrates says, if death is annihilation, that's not too bad. But if what people say about death is true, and that in the underworld you get to converse with people like Agamemnon and Achilles and the heroes of old, then death's a really good thing.
Right.
And Socrates says that he has a kind of Achillean choice. I could disobey the law, I could pay the bribe, I could get out, I could flee, one of the suggestions that his supporters makes, flee to Thebes or someplace like that.
Right.
And he says, but I can't do that because like Achilles, I have to have a high character. I have to be a person of strong character.
Right.
I'd rather live a glorious but short life than just drag on a meaningless existence, which is what faces him. So to go back to the Anthony Long quote, we see here the Homeric ideas playing out really through all of Greek culture.
Exactly. And for Socrates, this escape wasn't just something he was musing about. He could have.
Right.
His friends had bribed the right people. The door was open, but he chose not to do it.
So before we wrap up Book 9 and take a little glimpse at Book 10, did the speech of Ajax, this brawny hero, did it have any impact on Achilles?
It didn't at all. I love the speech itself because it's kind of a non-speech.
Right.
I'll just read the beginning of it, but it's almost as if Ajax went not preparing to speak at all.
Okay.
And he's had it by the end. And he says, his speech is, "Odysseus, master soldier and mariner, let us go." He's not even talking to Achilles, right? "I don't see the end of this affair achieved by this night's visit. This is worthless. Forget it. Nothing for it but to report our talk for what it's worth here to the Danons who wait sitting there."
Yeah.
So Ajax is like, there's no talking to this guy.
Right. He's made up his mind.
He's made up his mind.
So they go back to the camp.
Yep.
They enter into Agamemnon's quarters, as Lombardo says, surrounded by officers drinking their health from gold cups and shouting questions. Agamemnon says, "Odysseus, tell me, is he, Achilles, willing to repel the enemy fire and save the ships, or does he refuse, his heart still in the grip of wrath?" In the reply, "Son of Atreus," Odysseus says, "most glorious Agamemnon, far from quenching this wrath, Achilles is filled with even more. He spurns you and your gifts." So Achilles' choice is clear. Honor is going to trump, time is going to trump all of these material blessings.
Yes, all day long.
Yeah.
Yep.
So no women, no villages, no son-in-law of Agamemnon. It's got to be his own personal honor.
Exactly right.
And how is this not selfish? Doesn't he care about people like Patroclus? Doesn't he care? Or maybe it is selfish, and the category is one I shouldn't impose upon the epic itself. What do you think?
I'm always uncomfortable with taking kind of modern notions of right and wrong propriety and imposing them on this very ancient poem. I think it's hard not to see Achilles' choice as selfish in some kind of way. In terms of kind of, arete of kind of one-upping Agamemnon, he's done it here. So he's still, and in some ways he's kind of showing himself to be the better man. Agamemnon, he doesn't have another bullet in his chamber.
Yeah.
Right? This is it for him. And as we'll see, it takes something extraordinary and extraordinarily tragic to get Achilles out of the tent. Right.
Yeah, as I try to find a contemporary analog, a comparison, the only thing I can think of is in the world of athletics. And unfortunately, the stakes in athletics are so low compared to something like this that it doesn't really resonate with the contemporary audience. But if you really are the greatest athlete, there's no way you're going to tolerate being placed on the bench during the championship game.
Exactly.
And we don't tend to think that's selfish. I don't think so.
Well, it's interesting that you bring this up. I was just watching this documentary on Michael Jordan.
Exactly. Yep.
Are we thinking of the same thing?
Yeah, I've seen it. Yep. What's it called?
The Last Dance.
The Last Dance.
And you were thinking about the Pippen moment?
The Pippen moment.
Exactly. So there was a moment in it was a playoff in the early 90s. And,
right.
Phil Jackson was drawing up the last play.
Right, and it didn't include Pippen.
It did not include Pippen, and he refused to go back in the game.
He went back to his tent?
It was a very Achillean moment.
Scottie Pippen, if you're listening, we mean no personal offense
No,
here.
Please, right.
Check out our website if you...
And I believe how that played out is the ball went to Tony Kukoc, and he made the shot.
Yeah.
Right.
So it all turned out right in the end.
For the Bulls.
Yes, for the Bulls.
But not for Pippen, though. He's still living that down.
He is, for sure.
Right.
And there was quite a bit of criticism of Pippen after the documentary aired, because people were then reminded of that low point in his career.
Yeah, exactly right. It's something that he will be always maybe not entirely, but he will be remembered for that moment.
Yeah, and then Diomedes, he kind of gets the last word as Book 9 wraps up. We see this very interesting bookending of Book 9. Begins with a speech of Diomedes, after Agamemnon, ends with a speech of Diomedes. Diomedes gives this interesting advice. He says, "Son of Atreus, you should never have pleaded with him or offered all those gifts. Achilles was arrogant enough without your help. Let him do what he wants. Stay here. He'll fight later, all right, when he is ready or a god tells him to. Now I want everyone to do as I say. Enjoy some food and wine to keep up your strength. Get some sleep. When the rosy light first streaks the sky, Rhododoctylos, rosy-fingered dawn, get your troops and horses into formation before the ships. Fight in the front yourselves." That's so dramatic because Achilles is not coming back, not until much, much later, after the death of Patroclus.
Exactly.
So Diomedes, true to his word, says, we can't count on him. Do something yourself. Have your own moment of excellence.
Right. So Diomedes is right. He says it's going to take a supreme act for this man to come out of the tent. He basically said pretty much the most of this book has been a waste of time.
That's right. When he is ready, or a god tells him to, he'll fight later.
He'll fight again.
Yeah, and the god that tells him to is Zeus, by orchestrating the death of Achilles' best friend.
Patroclus.
Yeah.
Right, some great foreshadowing.
Okay, Jeff, so as we finish up this episode, we've completed Book 9.
Yep.
Let's take a moment to look at Book 10, the Dolaneia, which I know is probably your favorite book. Is that right?
Oh, yeah, this is my favorite, much in the same way that The Golden Girls is your favorite sitcom of all time, right?
So what is Book 10 about? Well, as a throwback. So what is Book 10 about?
Well, it's actually pretty fascinating. So it's like Book 9 called The Embassy. This is referred to as the Dolaneia, and it involves this nighttime foray of Odysseus and Diomedes going to spy on the Trojan camp. And as they come along, they meet coming the other way this hapless spy from the Trojan side named Dolon, and they dispatch him with extreme prejudice.
So the Dolaneia is named after this character,
Yes.
Dolon, who's a Trojan,
Yes.
on his own nighttime mission
Right.
to reconnoiter the Greek camp, to
Yes.
sneak up and try to see what's going on.
Exactly.
And through the will of Zeus, these two raiding parties bump into each other
Right.
in the no man's land, right? The DMZ in between the two camps.
Right. And then Diomedes and Odysseus go on to sneak into the Trojan camp, where they find several sleeping Trojan warriors and stab them to death as they sleep. It's a brutal book, both in the way that they dispatch Dolon through trickery and the way that they kill these men as they sleep. And it's one of the reasons that many critics have thought that this book is not originally Homeric. That was a later interpolation.
Yeah, an insertion.
Of
some kind.
So largely because of just the very unheroic way that Odysseus and Diomedes behave.
So what do you think of that theory? Do you think that Odysseus and Diomedes, the trickster, the versatile man, Diomedes, the good at the war cry, that they're acting in a way not true to their character in this book?
Yeah, I do. I think on that level, it doesn't work. It's been such a long time since I looked at and studied this. It'd be interesting to read kind of linguistic analyses of Book 10 to see if that's also at odds with the rest of the poetry. But I was certainly it does stick out as kind of an odd It's very much Odysseus and Diomedes out of character. In the last episode, we were talking about that duel between Diomedes and Glaucus,
right?
And they kind of set up kind of the rules of engagement,
right?
And there's lots of things.
The Geneva Convention.
Yes, there's lots of things that you have to do before you draw your weapons, and to just simply take out your spear and stab sleeping men seems to be a complete rejection of that.
Why can't you get any glory from that? See, that's the issue for me.
Yeah.
Is it not possible to get glory from stabbing sleeping men?
I would say no, there's not.
Because they have to know you're the one that killed them.
Yes, they have to. It's important that if you're killing someone, that they know who they're being killed by. Right. So it's like Odysseus at the end of the Cyclops episode, where he can't stand not taking credit for what he's done.
Being anonymous.
The Cyclops has to know who did it.
Yeah.
Right? Now, of course, the fallout from that is terrible. But here, too, so the men who are being killed don't know who they're being killed by. And it's also a nighttime raid. They have to kind of get in and get out. You can't strip them of stuff to pile up outside your tent. So there's not even that avenue for kind of the glory of the trophy. It's completely at odds with what we see. And it doesn't work. So
an argument in favor of the idea that the Dolaneia Book 10 doesn't fit is that Virgil picks up on this in his very sensitive, capable way in the Aeneid, and he has the nighttime raid of Nisus and Euryalus.
Oh, right.
Which I believe is in Book 11.
Yes.
And it ends in utter catastrophe.
Yeah.
Because they're not satisfied with being successful in the camp of the Rutulians. They also have to go overboard with a kind of wicked bloodlust.
Yes.
And that eventually leads to their own demise.
Right. Hubris invites nemesis.
Correct.
Every time.
Absolutely.
Right.
So what do we have on the menu, so to speak, for episode 4, Jeff? Where do we go from here?
Well, we're going to continue our look at Homer, but we're going to hopefully wrap it up.
Right.
That's the idea. So we're going to look at some of the latter books. We're going to look at book 18.
The Shield.
The Shield, where Achilles receives his new armor from Hephaestus. Yes. The death of Hector, the climactic
22.
duel
Yep.
between Hector and Achilles.
Where the gods abandon Hector.
Yes.
And say, I'm sorry, your fate's run out.
It's a brutal scene.
Yep. Here's Achilles.
Yes.
And his days come for you.
And then ending with the ransom of Hector's body back to Hector's father, Priam.
Book 24.
Yes.
Where Priam has the catabasis. He descends down, led by Mercury.
Yes.
Led by Hermes. He descends down to the tent of Achilles. And he says in these memorable lines, I've done what no man has done. I've kissed the hands of the man who killed my son.
Yes. See, I would argue the most courageous act
of the whole epic.
Of the whole epic.
Is Priam, this old man.
He's likely going to die, but he's got to do it.
Are we going to continue pronouncing his name in 2 different ways?
Yes, exactly. That's just to keep the audience on their toes.
Priam,
yes.
Okay.
Prius, like you drive. Yeah.
So as we wrap it up, Jeff, you're going to have a nice, memorable bon mot for our audience.
I'm going to run out. I'm going to run out of food. And
first, it was bon appetit.
I know. And
eat fresh.
Eat fresh. I think today. I think I'm just going to leave us with the words of Michael Jackson by way of Weird Al. Just eat it. All right. See you next time.